week I sat down and filmed a video sharing 7 tips for shooting your first concert, so today I wanted to follow that up with 7 tips for shooting your first music festival. My first tip is to be prepared and to submit all your paperwork ahead of time. Because festivals involve so much production at such a large scale, I think that it's really important to make sure that you have all your paperwork sorted at least a day or two before the festival. And the reason I say a day or two and not a week or so is because a lot of the times things are still getting confirmed up until the day before or the day that the festival begins. One thing that I think is super important paperwork-wise is to submit your coverage requests ahead of time. So this can mean anything from interviews, artist portraits, anything that involves on-site coverage with an artist usually needs to be arranged and pre-approved by the artist team in advance. So basically, if you want to interview an artist, you want to get that submitted as soon as you hear back from the festival. Some artist teams or press teams will send out press releases or will email attending media about a week to a couple days before the festival. And I think that it's always good to get ahead of that and submit your request to the artist team because artists have limited availability in their schedules. Usually you won't get confirmed for on-site coverage until a day or two before the festival begins because they're usually still finalizing the artist schedules. I think usually advances are sent 2 to 4 days or so before the festival begins for most festivals that I've attended. So because of this, if you're looking to get in with an artist, whether it's for an interview or for portraits, it can definitely help to get in your press request as early as possible so that your PR contact can work with the artist team to fit your request into the artist schedule as advances and schedules are getting sorted. And it's also important to make sure that you have all your paperwork or any appropriate forms sorted. Some festivals, such as Outside Lands, require you to apply for a bag tag to bring in your gear. I think that the form for that closed I want to say a week before the festival. Some festivals will also require you to submit a COI or certificate of insurance if you're going to be anywhere backstage or on stage for liability reasons, basically just to make sure that the festival doesn't get sued if anything does happen. So that's something that's really important to submit ahead of time as well. And the next thing that I want to talk about is credentials, probably the most important thing for making sure that you're actually able to shoot and attend the festival. So this definitely varies by festival and who's organizing the festival, but I think it's super important to figure out ahead of time when and where you'll be picking up your credentials. Some festivals will have their credential pickup on site, for example, Second Sky. So how this works is usually they'll have a box office on site. So you just go to the box office and usually there'll be a line for press or media and that's where you pick up your credentials. This is super convenient because then you don't have to pick up your credentials off-site and it's day of, so you're already going to be there anyways. But where you can run into issues with this is if they don't have your credentials sorted out or if there's an issue getting you in, you're already on site and you'll probably lose valuable shooting time trying to sort that out. So definitely pros and cons to on-site same-day pickup, but obviously credential pickup isn't something that you usually have much of a say in, so it's not anything that we can really change as photographers. And then sometimes for some festivals like Hard Summer, credential pickup will be off-site. If I remember correctly, credential pickup for both artist crew and for press were at the Artist Hotel in San Bernardino, which was near Nos, which is where Hard Summer was. So in this case, this is definitely something that you want to figure out in advance because you might have to arrange transportation since it's not really on site and it's probably not where you're staying or where your Airbnb is either. So this fortunately worked out for me for Hard Summer because my friends were driving there, so we were able to make a stop at the Artist Hotel to pick up our credentials, and they also had a shuttle to take artists and artist teams to the festival. But if you're flying into the festival or you don't have ground transportation, this can definitely be a bit annoying since artist hotels or offsite pickup isn't always walking distance from the festival. And the next tip that I have is to plan ahead. Things like set times and venue maps are usually released about a week or so before the festival. I think that most things usually start getting sent to press or released publicly about a week before the festival begins. The reason that set times are important are because if you're with a publication, usually your editor or the person you're working with will have a list of artists or sets that they'd like you to cover. So it's super good to figure out who they want you to cover, who you want to cover, or who you just want to see for fun, and then figuring out when each artist or band is going on, which stage they're performing at, and whether there are any overlaps or conflicts with those set times. You also want to figure out how far different stages are from each other because it's definitely doable to split sets at most venues. But at least for me, I'm not in like the best shape, so I noticed that Outside Lands I was getting super tired just like running from stage to stage, especially because the main stage and the second biggest stage, like B stage, were at opposite ends of the venue. So it was a lot of walking around and a lot of walking around uphill, so that was definitely super tiring. So I think it's important when you're planning for the festival to figure out exactly where the artists you want to see are performing to make sure that you have enough time to see them without having to run around all over the place all day. Again, it's definitely doable to split sets at festivals, and I'm not saying not to, but something else that's also important to keep in mind, depending on the type of coverage that you're looking for, is that most artists will adhere to the standard photo policy, which means that pit access is first 3 songs only. This means that most likely if you want to split sets for 2 artists who are performing at the same time, most likely by the time you get from the first artist set to the second, you've already missed first 3, so you'll have to shoot from the crowd or front of house if the festival allows. And another note is that if you're doing interviews or press, you want to figure out where the press tent is and how far away it is from different stages. Usually you want to be there 5 or 10 minutes early just in case the artist is there early. That way you can make the most of the time that you have because artist schedules are so hectic at festivals. And my next tip is to get to the pit early. Sometimes at bigger festivals or for bigger artists, they'll limit the number of photographers who are allowed in the pit at a given time. So this might mean that, say, 100 photographers are credentialed to shoot at a specific festival, but maybe for one of the headliners, they're only allowing 25 photographers into the pit. So these are random numbers that I'm just making up, but basically what I'm trying to say is that even if you have photo credentials or a photo pass, you might not be allowed in the pit if there are already too many people in the pit. So because of this, I like to show up 10 to 15 minutes before an artist is supposed to get on just to wait by the pit, and this is also good because in addition to making sure that you have pit access, it also helps you get a better spot for shooting. It's also good to show up early because you want to make sure that you don't miss the photo escort. This is basically someone from the festival press team who will walk all the photographers from a designated meetup spot to the pit, and then they'll usually escort the photographers out after first 3 as well. Showing up early can also pay off from a technical perspective as well, in the sense that you have time to figure out your gear, like what lens you want to use, or if the stage has an interesting layout. For example, some bigger stages have kind of the stage and then like a catwalk leading out towards the crowd. You can figure out where you want to stand for the best angles or the best shots. So going early does give you time to figure things like that out as well, instead of just showing up right as the artist gets on. This next step is something that I feel like I can't emphasize enough, and it was something that I was honestly really terrible at doing starting out, but it's to make sure that you actually have downtime just to enjoy the festival. It's super tempting, especially when you're first starting out, to try to see as many artists as possible, to try to shoot as many sets as possible, but the reality is that you honestly get burned out so fast, and it also feels a lot more like work than something that you're also doing for fun. And I definitely did this a lot, especially in my first few festivals. Something that I really figured out the hard way is that you really just get so tired, and it becomes so much less about the artist and enjoying the music and so much more about just trying to feel like you're getting the shot and you don't have FOMO, which I personally feel like is not the best way to enjoy a music festival, because at the end of the day, it's your time and your money that you've spent to be there, so you really want to make the most out of the experience. Festivals can also be an all-day thing. I think they can usually go from like 6 to 12 hours, so it's super important to keep in mind that the venues are usually super large, which means that stages are far apart, so if you're trying to shoot every single act, you're basically just running around on your feet all day with your camera and your heavy gear, so you're honestly just gonna end up burning yourself out by the time the headliner gets on. I usually like to set aside an hour or two in between sets where I'll just walk around, get food, chill, have fun. If there's friends, I'll try to meet up with them and then we can all hang out. And I think that for me, this just really helps to balance the work aspect of festivals with the intention of going there for fun and really enjoying the music and the atmosphere.